A lot of us inherit fruit trees, or maybe we go ahead and plant a fruit tree so we can enjoy fruit down the road. But they do require a little bit of commitment on the gardener end of it. So we need to prune them annually. We usually prune them when we first get them to get them starting to shape up the way we want them. But then we also need to continue to train them and allow a lot of sunlight into the plant from year to year. Occasionally we may inherit a property or have a tree that's kind of gotten away from us and we need to kind of bring it back into control. A good time to prune is when the plant is dormant. It's just easier to see the structure of your plant. If you have any rubbing branches, anything that's broken or maybe kind of suspicious as far as a disease, that we can go ahead and prune those out. We can also do some summer pruning if we start to see what's called sucker growth, some branches that are growing straight up through the plant that's reducing sunlight to it. We can go ahead and take those out anytime during the season. Some theories are to go ahead and let your plant flower and see where your fruit is developing on the tree, and then prune accordingly so that during the dormant period you're not maybe pruning out some of that live wood that would produce some good quality fruit for you. This here is an example of our flower bud. So those are the ones we probably want to keep so we can have some fruit. These here are leaf buds, which are important as well. But if there's a situation where this is a bad crotch angle or some other reason we needed to prune that, we could make sure that we keep the flower bud and remove this portion of the plant that's a little bit expendable and make a nice 1/4 inch cut above that outward bud there, and that will seal over and be a nice healthy pruning cut. One of the first steps you can look for is for anything that is broken, diseased, or maybe questionable as far as how healthy it is. With this particular branch that got broken during the winter time, we can go ahead and remove that. It's a pretty good decision. When we look at pruning a tree, we need to probably walk all the way around the tree, get a good idea of what we think the ideal tree should look like. One of the key points is providing open areas so sunlight gets into the tree. This here particular branch, I believe, is shading this here lower branch, and so by removing it, we're going to allow a lot more sunlight getting down into the canopy and hopefully down into the rest of the tree. So therefore, I've made a decision to remove this one up here. It's a pretty good sized branch, and so it has a little bit of weight. We can't just cut it off right at the connection there. It may tear the bark and may also just be awkward. So we're going to go ahead and remove this. Depending on the size of the branch, you may want to make a cut part way through the bottom of the branch. That's going to keep that bark from tearing. And then we can cut the rest of it off coming out a little bit past that. Now we're going to make our final cut, and it's going to be outside the branch collar. If you look on trees, particular apples are pretty good at showing that branch collar. There's just a ridge of cells there, and we want to cut right outside of it. A few years back, we used to think that we made a flush cut, and that made a much larger opening. Took a lot longer for the plant to seal off, and there really wasn't good cells there to close over. So now we know that we need to cut outside that branch collar. It leaves just a little bit of what we might call a stub, but it's a better way for the plant to seal over. We want to remove any branch that may be crisscrossing, crossing over another one, or rubbing. And that just, again, makes a good decision as far as which one to remove to open that plant up to more air and sunlight. On our fruit trees, we kind of like to have branches going at 90-degree angles. Oftentimes we don't get to that point, maybe 60 to 80-degree angles. So anything going kind of straight up was going to provide shade for the lower canopy of the plant. So those are usually good indicators of ones that we may want to take off. One of the nice things about pruning trees annually is you get to come back the next year and make decisions again. So one of these you may want to keep for a year and then the next year take it off. Right now we got 3 branches kind of shading the canopy, so we're going to go ahead and take off at least one of those for this year. Every time you take a branch off, you kind of can reevaluate. You may want to get down, take a look around, or may have somebody helping you. For this year, I've decided to leave these 2 branches that are kind of going upright, but I am going to head them back or kind of take the top out of them, always cutting back to a side branch so that the growth can be targeted in that direction, and maybe next year come back and make it lower or reevaluate, see what I want to do in upcoming years. On an apple tree, we typically take out about 1/3 of that growth each year. If you prune out more, you're going to have a lot of sucker growth, or water sprouts we call them, and that just means you have to go back and do some more pruning later on. So typically, if we can, on an apple tree, take out about 1/3 of that wood each year, opening up sunlight to the plant can handle that, and you'll still get good quality fruit and have plenty of fruiting wood to get a harvest off that year. Nowadays, a lot of people are planting dwarf type fruit trees. That kind of eliminates the need for ladders. If you do have a larger tree where you need to get up in there, we want to make sure it's safe. And so get a ladder that will have good footing. Don't want to have any accidents when you're doing any type of fruit tree pruning. Maybe have a spotter to make sure you have someone there to hold the ladder. And ideally, we might want to start thinking about getting different types of fruit trees that are shorter and easier to maintain. We also have equipment such as pole pruners that you can stand on the ground and still go ahead and cut out some of those branches that are hard to reach. It's not uncommon to find these suckers or water sprouts coming up from tissues that we may not need those. And so we go ahead and remove those at any time of the year. We try to cut them as closely to the plant tissue as we can. You may come across a situation where you had a branch break off or was damaged, and this is a situation where we want to go ahead and prune it back to a growing point so that plant can go ahead and seal over. Right now, this is a situation where disease and insects may be attracted and may cause problems to your plant down the road. It's not uncommon to get a situation where you have rubbing branches. These two trunks are trying to grow together. There's just not a lot of space there. This crotch angle is not very good. As the tree would continue to grow and get fruit on there, it'd be a lot of weight and stress, and probably would eventually fail or split open. In this situation, we want to go ahead and remove this whole branch, and to do that, we need to do it in a couple steps. We'll want to take the weight off of it, so we go ahead and cut it up higher so we can get all that weight off of the plant. And then we can come down here and make our final cut so that the plant can seal over easier. And that we'd want to do right about in through here. That branch collar, again, is where you want to be at. In a situation like this, probably a little harder to identify. But if we can go ahead and make as small as a cut here, that plant can seal over a little bit quicker would be the ideal situation. This is a situation that we wouldn't like to see, but not necessarily uncommon as a tree ages and we start to get some decay. It's just an indicator that we maybe need to think about expanding our orchard and getting a new tree for future harvest when this one is no longer producing. This is a good situation example as far as encroachment or getting too shaded out. This tree over here is kind of outgrowing this one, and therefore it's shading these lower branches. These branches actually have become dead and so are needing to be removed to make this tree healthy again. And so this situation is why we want to prune on an annual basis to prevent some of that shading situations. We've taken the large weight off of the plant, and so now we want to come back and make that branch collar cut out here so that will go ahead and seal over. These are some branches that were cut that weren't quite into that branch collar area, and you see there's a little dead stub there that hasn't sealed over very well. So we can come back and prune these up to make them seal over better, but that's what I want to try and do here, is make that cut correctly so that plant does seal. On this particular apple tree, we wanted to only take off about 1/3. That's pretty common. We had a few dead branches, so it may look like we took off a little bit more than that. The only way I can visualize that is kind of get a feel for what the tree looks like before I start pruning, and then kind of pile up my branches here. When it looks like I've have about 1/3 of it taken off, I can stop pruning for this year and remember that next year is a new season and I can go back and do some more pruning. If we were to take off a half or more, that will just stimulate a lot of new plant growth, which would require more pruning the following year. So ideally, if we can keep in that about 1/3 range, that keeps the tree on a nice even keel with its food resources, and that way we can have a nice food crop from year to year. Our branches that we've pruned off, we do want to get them out of the orchard, part of that sanitation process, and so if we can go ahead and pile it up, whether you can take it to a landfill or a transfer station, or you have a community situation where you can take branches Otherwise, if you're in an area where you could burn them, that would be a nice way to go ahead and remove this plant tissue and get rid of any disease potential.
For more information, visit your local extension office or visit our website at kansasgreenyards.org.